Have you ever noticed that the wealthiest people rarely seem obsessed with making more money? It's easy to assume they're simply lucky or smarter than everyone else. But if you look closely, you'll find something far more interesting. Long before they became wealthy, they stopped treating money as the prize. Instead, they became obsessed with something almost nobody talks about: control. Control over their time. Control over their decisions. Control over who they work with, what they build, and even how they think. While most people spend their lives chasing bigger paychecks, the truly wealthy spend their lives designing a life where money becomes a byproduct of the choices they control. This difference sounds small, but it quietly separates people who stay trapped in the same financial cycle from those who eventually escape it. And once you see this hidden pattern, you'll start noticing it everywhere. In businesses, careers, investments, and even in your own daily decisions. Because the biggest secret about wealth isn't how much money you make. It's what you're actually chasing. And by the end of this story, you may realize you've been chasing the wrong thing all along. When Ethan graduated from college, he believed he had everything figured out. He landed a respectable corporate job, earned a decent salary, and followed every piece of financial advice he'd heard growing up. Work hard. Get promoted. Save more. Repeat. At first, it felt like progress. Every raise gave him a temporary sense of victory. Every bonus convinced him he was getting closer to financial freedom. But something strange kept happening. The harder he worked to earn more money, the less control he seemed to have over his own life. His calendar belonged to his employer. His weekends disappeared into exhaustion. Even his vacations required someone else's approval. Then one unexpected conversation with an older entrepreneur completely changed the way Ethan thought about wealth. It wasn't about making more money. It was about understanding what money could never buy if you spent your entire life chasing it. And that realization would slowly transform everything. The conversation happened on a delayed flight. Ethan wasn't looking for advice. He was simply frustrated after receiving an email that canceled another long-awaited vacation because of an urgent business priority. As he sighed and locked his phone, the man sitting beside him smiled. Tough day? Ethan laughed quietly. You could say that. The man introduced himself as Daniel. He looked ordinary. No expensive watch. No designer clothes. No obvious signs of extraordinary wealth. They talked casually while waiting for takeoff. Ethan mentioned his recent promotion with pride. I finally crossed 6 figures, he said. Daniel nodded politely. Congratulations. Are you happier now? The question caught Ethan off guard. I guess so. Daniel smiled again. You guessed. That tells me enough. For the next few minutes, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel asked another question. Can you decide not to check your email for the next 2 weeks? Ethan laughed. Absolutely not. Can you refuse your boss if he calls tonight? No. Can you leave your job tomorrow without worrying about your bills? Ethan stayed silent. Daniel wasn't trying to embarrass him. He was simply measuring something Ethan had never measured before. Not income. Not net worth. Control. Daniel leaned back in his seat. Most people think they're chasing money, he said. But what they're really chasing is permission. Permission to rest. Permission to travel. Permission to spend time with their families. Permission to live. Those words stayed in Ethan's mind long after the flight landed. He couldn't stop thinking about them. On paper, he was earning more than ever before. But every important decision in his life still depended on someone else's approval. That night, he opened his banking app. The numbers looked better than they ever had. Yet for the first time, they didn't make him feel rich, they made him wonder what he had traded away to earn them. Around this point, if you're enjoying stories that uncover the hidden psychology behind money and success, consider subscribing to Dark Capital. There's a lot more beneath the surface than most people ever realize. Over the following weeks, Ethan started noticing something he had ignored for years. The wealthiest people he admired weren't constantly talking about making more money. They were talking about owning assets. Owning businesses. Owning investments. Owning their time. It was a completely different conversation. For the first time in his life, Ethan realized there were 2 very different games people were playing. One game was about earning. The other was about gaining control. And only one of them seemed to lead to real freedom. At first, Ethan believed the answer was simple. If I just make another $20,000 a year, he thought, everything will get easier. But 6 months later, another raise arrived. So did more meetings. More responsibility. More late nights. More expectations. His income had grown. His freedom had not. That contradiction refused to leave his mind. One evening, Ethan called Daniel and asked if they could meet for coffee. Daniel agreed without hesitation. They met at a quiet cafe on a rainy Saturday morning. Ethan came prepared with questions. I don't understand, he admitted. If money isn't the goal, why does everyone spend their entire life chasing it? Daniel stirred his coffee before answering. Because money is visible. Control isn't. Ethan frowned. Daniel continued. People celebrate promotions because everyone can see them. They admire expensive cars because they're obvious. But nobody congratulates you for building a life where you own your time. That sentence hit Ethan harder than he expected. Daniel pulled out a notebook and drew 2 simple columns. At the top of the first column, he wrote income. At the top of the second, he wrote control. Most people spend their lives trying to increase the first column, Daniel said. The wealthy quietly build the second. Then he asked Ethan another question. If your company disappeared tomorrow, how long would your income continue? Ethan didn't need to think. It would stop immediately. Daniel nodded. That's because you've built a paycheck, not a system. For the next hour, Daniel explained an idea Ethan had never seriously considered. Employees sell time. Owners build systems. Investors own pieces of systems. The difference wasn't intelligence. It wasn't luck. It was where they placed their attention. Most people optimize their calendar for the next paycheck. The wealthy optimize their lives for long-term control. That weekend, Ethan went home and looked at everything he owned. His apartment. His car. His subscriptions. His designer clothes. His newest phone. Almost every purchase had been made to reward himself for working harder. Yet none of those purchases gave him more freedom. In fact, many of them demanded even more income to maintain. That realization was uncomfortable. He had mistaken expensive living for financial progress. For years, he had been upgrading his lifestyle instead of upgrading his independence. From that day forward, Ethan made one small change every month. Instead of asking, "What do I want to buy?" he started asking, "What gives me more control?" Sometimes the answer was learning a valuable skill. Sometimes it was investing instead of spending. Sometimes it was saying no to work that paid well but consumed his life. Slowly, something remarkable began to happen. His financial decisions became calmer. He stopped chasing every opportunity. He became more selective. Ironically, as he became less desperate for money, better opportunities started finding him. People trusted him more. They respected his boundaries. They saw someone who made decisions instead of reacting to circumstances. Ethan finally understood something Daniel had tried to teach him on that flight. Control changes the way you think. And the way you think changes the opportunities you notice. Money follows behavior far more often than behavior follows money. The people who seem effortlessly successful usually aren't running faster than everyone else. They're simply playing a different game altogether. Their goal was never to collect the most dollars. Their goal was to create a life where money no longer dictated every decision they made.
A year later, Ethan's life looked surprisingly different. His salary hadn't doubled. He hadn't become a millionaire overnight. And from the outside, very little seemed to have changed. But beneath the surface, everything was different. He had built an emergency fund that gave him breathing room. He had invested consistently instead of emotionally. He had developed a skill that generated income outside his full-time job. Most importantly, he had stopped making decisions out of fear. One afternoon, his manager walked into his office with an unexpected request. The company wanted him to lead a major project. It came with more prestige, a larger paycheck, and a condition that he would need to be available almost every evening and most weekends for the next year. Just 12 months earlier, Ethan wouldn't have hesitated. He would have accepted immediately, believing that more money automatically meant a better life. But now, he asked himself a different question. How much control will this give me? The answer was obvious. Very little. For the first time in his career, Ethan politely declined. His coworkers thought he had lost his mind. Some even called him unambitious. Others couldn't understand why anyone would reject such an opportunity. But Ethan wasn't rejecting success. He was redefining it. Instead of sacrificing another year of his life, he used that time to expand the small consulting business he had been building on weekends. It wasn't glamorous. Growth was slow. Some months were discouraging. There were moments when he questioned every decision he had made. But each new client reduced his dependence on a single paycheck. Each investment increased his future options. Each disciplined decision bought back another small piece of his freedom. 3 years passed. One morning, Ethan woke up without an alarm clock. Not because he was retired. Not because he had won the lottery. But because his income no longer depended entirely on selling every hour of his day. For the first time in his adult life, he could choose. He could choose the projects he wanted. He could choose the people he worked with. He could choose when to take a vacation without asking for permission. And that feeling was worth more than any luxury he had ever imagined buying. Looking back, Ethan realized the biggest mistake he had made wasn't earning too little. It was believing that money itself was the destination. Money had never been the real prize. It was simply a tool. The real prize was control. Control over your time. Control over your attention. Control over your decisions. Because once someone else controls those things, it doesn't matter how impressive your paycheck looks. You may have more income than ever before, but you'll still feel like you're borrowing your own life. The wealthiest people understand a truth that often goes unnoticed. They don't wake up every morning asking, "How can I make more money today?" They ask, "How can I build a life that gives me more choices tomorrow?" That single shift in thinking changes everything. It changes how you spend, how you invest, how you work, how you define success, and ultimately, it changes the direction of your entire future. So before you chase your next raise, your next bonus, or your next financial milestone, ask yourself one simple question. Am I chasing more money? Or am I building more control? The answer to that question may determine not only how wealthy you become, but how free you ever feel. Thank you for watching Dark Capital. If this story changed the way you think about money and freedom, subscribe to the channel for more stories that uncover the hidden psychology behind wealth, success, and the decisions that quietly shape our lives. Remember, the richest person isn't the one who earns the most. It's the one who owns the most control.